Story 1. The large schoolyard at my school had a set of planters in the center. They were basically four triangles made of brick that pointed in at each other and created an X-shaped walkway between. The outside sides had a bench, each attached. People would sit and chat with each other on the benches, teachers and students alike. There was very little litter or vandalism. The plants were kind of pretty, insofar as any secondary schooler would care to notice. One year, a duck made her nest in one of the planters, and apart from a few, "Oh hey, a duck nest" comments, it was left alone. Then, for some reason, the school decided to rip the planters out. Took them 2/3 of the school year to do it, and blocked off the X walkways, so everyone had to crush by on the outside lanes between classes. Everyone was super curious as to what the planters would be replaced by. Turns out, nothing. They simply bricked over the holes left by the planters and left it as a huge empty space. We didn't even get new benches, so no one had anywhere to sit during break. People started to miss the plants, since the lack of color left the whole area kind of bland. We also kept to the old X walkway, since stepping over the former planters felt weird. Story 2 was on the boys' varsity soccer team in high school. New head coach wanted to emphasize a more analytical approach, and as such had the booster club buy a $10,000 goalpost camera. None of the team liked the idea anyway, especially since the girls' soccer team used their money for new jerseys and nicer balls, and they still made it farther in their playoffs than we did almost every single year. As it turns out, the coach couldn't figure out how to put the camera together, and we never used it. Biggest waste of $10,000 I've ever seen. Story 3. My son's current school sent out an email to parents announcing that they'd like to add voice projection to every class. He's in first grade, and there are 20 kids in his class. Totally unnecessary. They had a demo session, and it sounded horrible. My high school got these midway through my junior year, and they sucked. The range wasn't great, and the receiver in one classroom would pick up the microphone in another, and the battery life was awful, so the teachers rarely used it. The best thing they were used for was the one time that my teacher noticed a kid in the room across the hall was asleep in class. They were watching a video, and the other teacher had stepped out of the room for a minute, and walked over to the door so that the other room's receiver would pick up his mic, and said, "Wake up," and then closed his door. Story 4. When I was still a student, my school spent almost $200,000 to paint the roads outside our school. You read that right. Almost $200,000 of our precious tuition dollars to paint the roads outside blue and yellow. To pour salt on this painful wound, the paint job didn't even make it through winter. So, just to reiterate, $200,000 for 3 months of painted road. I think I'm still angry about it. Story 5. My school just spent tens of millions of dollars on a remodel that includes a new commons and front office area, which were not needed, but no new classrooms, which were desperately needed. The old commons was warm, inviting, bright, and beautiful. It wasn't cold. The new commons is dark, cold, sterile, and uninviting. The exterior was changed too. The entire front of the school used to be attractive. Now, it looks like a prison. I think maybe the architect presented the design as a joke, but our principal liked it, so the architect just rolled with it. Story 6. Our mascot was a rocket, and a certain percentage of school construction money had to be spent on art. They spent $90,000 commissioning a giant rocket sculpture for the main field entrance. When it was unveiled, the artist had made one tiny change to the design. Instead of a pointy rocket tip, he'd gone with a rounded, mushroom tip. I mean, we thought it was hilarious, especially when they cut off the tip as their solution to the problem. But nobody liked it. Story 7. This isn't common knowledge, so I was really the only one incensed by it. But I worked for Cisco Foods as a baker at university, and the upper echelons of the administration had hired their own personal pastry chef to make these extravagant desserts for their meetings. The pastry chef was legit. She made absolutely amazing desserts of a wide variety every day, loaded them onto a cart, and with her baker's outfit and hat on, would wheel it up to their daily administration meetings. Her salary was paid for by the students of the school, so that the administrators could dine on first-class pastries and desserts made from scratch each day. She was really good at her job, and actually helped me improve in the bakery. But I was so mad her job even existed, simply to provide pastries to people who just sat around and decided how the school's money was spent. I obviously didn't make a stink about it to anyone because she was my friend, and I wouldn't ever dream of putting her employment at risk. But I couldn't help feeling like her entire career was to just make fat cats fatter, and it boiled my blood. Story 8. Cameras installed in nearly every inch of the school. Not for student safety, but because the school board didn't trust the kids. My school was miles behind other high schools. Old textbooks, and sometimes not enough textbooks. Computers were junk, no in-school programs. They spent every ounce of money on cameras and put the rest in the school board's pockets. Story 9. They bought flags of all the states and put them around this cage in an area full of gravel. They caged in the gravel to stop students from walking across the gravel. They also bought flags in the school colors to line the fence around campus. Only thing is, we were in an area which can get very windy with zero windshield, so those flags took a beating. By mid-year, they were an ugly, ugly frayed mess. Honorable mention was the bridge they built across the courtyard we weren't allowed to walk across that they eventually paved over. Shout out to the flagpole a kid did for Eagle Scouts that was taken down that same year by admin. And big shout out to the admin during my little sister's years there, where they sealed off all the inner hallway doors and added extra doors outside to stop students from traveling between classes indoors. Don't know what that solved, except adding extra minutes onto your travel time between classes. Story 10. In 2011, my college spent $32,000 to have Snooki come in as an inspirational speaker in some misguided attempt to connect with freshmen. Around the same time, there was a growing student-led movement to make the school more affordable. The student board revolted, and people confronted her during her speech. It was a glorious mess. That sucks, because my school had two epic inspo guys. One was a chalk artist, and he talked about how he was shy and bullied and but then found art, and it helped him come out of his shell. And while he's talking to you about this, he was making a massive chalk drawing of mountains and stuff. That was really awesome. Then we had a guy put on a show about the dangers of electricity. He worked for an electrical company, so he made some crap go bang. Unlike Dare, it was actually effective. No one was messing with electricity after that. Story 11. I went to a Catholic high school. Very few of the students were actually Catholic and went there because the local public school district was terrible. We won some contest or grant, and the school said they would allow the students to pick what the money was spent on. The options were new flooring for the gym, renovating the courtyard next to the chapel into a prayer garden, or renovating the courtyard next to the cafeteria into an outdoor eating space. Most people voted for new gym floors, and some people voted for the outdoor eating space. I do not know of anyone who voted for the prayer garden. Guess what won? The prayer garden. People, even teachers, were furious as the voting was clearly rigged to give us the appearance of a choice. If they really wanted a prayer garden, they should have just done the work without putting it to a vote. The funny thing about the prayer garden is that they actually made it nice and put in benches and plants and whatnot, but it was always locked and never used. Administration would often say during tours, "Oh, look at our lovely prayer garden for students. They voted for it." No, we did not. Story 12. Laminated ID cards that everyone had to wear around their necks on some dorky lanyard. No one did it, so they made it punishable by detention. After that, half the students still didn't do it, and the detention hall became so overwhelmed that they began to make backlogs. After a few weeks, not wearing a lanyard gave you a detention 2 months from then. Eventually, detention became so backlogged that the students started doing more severe transgressions because they would have graduated before they could actually be forced to go to their detention. After about a month, no one had to wear their ID cards at all anymore. They said it was for security purposes, so no one could sneak into the school. The thing is, you could put literally anything in the lanyard, and no one would check if it was your actual student ID card. I had a blank index card in mine, and no one ever said a thing to me. If someone actually wanted to sneak into the school, all they would need is a lanyard, and no one would ever check if it's actually authentic or not. Story 13. My school wasted so much money on plastic ID cards that you were supposed to scan into every room to assure you were there, and the IDs were also keys to get into the buildings. If you didn't have your card, you didn't get in, and you would also get in-school suspension. It wasn't a bad system, because you could easily take a photo of your ID to scan into rooms, but you'd have to bum a buddy to get into a building. But once there were internet problems, the whole system would shut down. And living in a rural wheat town, you could expect wind and rain and tornadoes and all that fun junk. Story 14. Well, we liked it at first, not so much after. I followed a product development study, and we got a fancy industry-grade laser cutter in our workplace. Then, after a couple of people were able to use it, the teacher decided it needed cleaning. She proceeded to use a toothpick and shove it into the nozzle where the laser comes out, damaging the mirror inside the machine. We had this thing for less than a week. 2 years later, I graduated. As far as I know, that thing is still broken. Story 15. My school buys so many useless things. Or at least when I went there. They dump all their money on the football team. Obviously, the football team doesn't really care, but other people did. One thing that everyone has a common hatred for that the school bought, even the football team, is the inflatable the school got. From what I heard, it costs about $4,000. It's this big inflatable that people could walk through. The inflatable has the school's mascot on it, and it's just plain weird. There were so many ways the school could have spent that money, but they chose to spend it on a stupid inflatable that's only used like 3 times a year. Story 16. Administrative bloat. When my father went to high school in the 1930s, each school had a principal and an office lady. The school board was a bunch of local businessmen who met once a month at the Grange Hall. When I went to high school in the 70s, each school had, take a breath, a principal with a secretary, a vice principal with a secretary, a dean of boys with a secretary, a dean of girls with a secretary, a dean of students with a secretary, and a full staff of counselors. The school board consisted of full-time politicians who occupied a permanent 2-story building with a full staff. Story 17. Principal's salary. Our old superintendent had a salary of over $200,000. Plus, in the year where a bunch of teachers had to be laid off because of a budget shortage, he got paid another $200,000 for unused vacation days. It should also be mentioned that it's been an open secret of him being a bit of a creep for decades. He's always had a very nice car with his initials as a vanity plate, and he resigned last year after sexual harassment allegations. Another thing I should mention is that this is all coming from a pretty poor school district. Story 18. Yonder pouches. You put your phone in them so you won't get on it during school. The bad thing? They are magnetically locked. You know when you buy something from a clothing store and they have to take that device on the clothing off with a super strong magnet? Yeah, that's how you open these to get your phone in and take it out. A couple of people had their speaker on the phone destroyed because of these. The worst part is the punishment, if you are found with your phone not in a yonder pouch. If they hear your phone go off in the pouch, or they see you have your phone out in class, or anything of the sort, they take your phone away for 2 days. 2 whole days. You won't have your phone that night or the next night. If you lose it on a Friday, you won't get it back until Tuesday. We don't do school on Mondays unless it's a snow makeup day. Nobody uses them. We all either leave our phones in our cars or shut them down and put them in our backpacks. Of course, the teachers like to try and search inside of the backpacks, which aren't even allowed in classrooms anymore. We also don't have lockers anymore. They tore all of them out and replaced them with shelves and cubbies to set the backpacks on. It's safe to say that quite a few things have been stolen. My school kind of sucks. Story 19. Oh, it's my time to shine. When my high school was being built, there was a huge automatic flagpole in the design and an indoor pool. They only had money for one of these outstanding features. The pool would have been used by the whole district for swim meets and other fun activities. The flagpole just made the school look like a mall from an 80s teen movie. They left the decision up to the principal. He picked the flagpole. Every other school in the district hated us because of that stupid pole. The best part was, it didn't even work in the rain. It didn't work in the rain, in a southeastern coastal city where it rains like 200 days a year. Story 20. My country is still a developing country, so many new technologies are not implemented and properly operated. 2 years ago, my high school installed an ID and a fingerprint scanner at the school main entrance gate so they could track whether the student came to school or not. Every student had to pay like $5 to $10 to get a personal ID card and get their fingerprint in the system. The principal was very serious with this the first week. Then, a couple of weeks later, students started forgetting their ID card. Some of them purposely annoyed the teachers, as if they didn't know how to use the machine or even put their fingers in the scanner. Then the machine started malfunctioning, and eventually just stopped working one day, and stood at the entrance gate, all dusty. A year later they did this again, and stopped in a month. I don't know what's happening now. Story 21. When I started secondary school, we had a canteen with proper home-style food being served. Cooked fresh, real meat and vegetables, cooked portion sizes. All the students loved it, and it was well used. School decided to replace this with a fast food style setup with processed burgers and fries to try and appeal to the kids. And up the prices too. Within a month, nobody visited the canteen anymore. Practically every kid in the school started bringing food from home. It took 3 months till they changed everything back again. Massive expense for absolutely no reason. Story 22. Lockers that didn't even work. Back in 2017, we had some school funds that were supposed to go into some new improvements to the school facilities. Some background information. In Singapore, it's part of secondary school culture to decorate our classrooms inside and out during certain parts of the year, like the Chinese New Year or some school event. That's a part of team building. Every class had something unique about them that they could show off to the rest. In the story, our classrooms all have windows facing the corridor outside. Decorations were usually placed right under the window so people walking by could see them. The new lockers were installed right outside our classrooms, covering the walls and blocking the decorations. The locks were made out of some cheap metal that oxidized within 1 week or so of use, and the lockers were made of cheap plastic. Nobody even used them because you could just grab the whole lock, twist it, pull it, and then manually open them because even the glue attaching them to the doors was weak. Eventually, we used the lockers for free without even paying for them, because there's no way those deserved our money. We just picked one locker and then randomly kicked things inside that no one would steal, like our schoolwork. It was hilarious. Story 23. My school had basically no proper heating or air conditioning. In Minnesota, most winters were cold enough for teachers to hand out blankets in some cases. Spring made you grateful for gross water fountains as you were sweating buckets. After a scandal involving underage girls, we were given a new vice principal. Her first decree? New windows. From what I've heard, it was a lot of money spent. We had to deal with construction during some classes for a good few months. Some classes even relocated due to them working. And what was the end result? Windows that can only open on the first floor, with black see-through shades. Let me say it again. With no real air conditioning, we had sun-absorbing black shades sweltering us even in the spring and fall. Couldn't open up a window on 2 floors to let the breeze in, and they couldn't even block out the sun's rays enough to make a classroom dark enough for a projector to function. Naturally, just about everyone despised her from the start. Story 24. My school buys anything and everything when it comes to the athletic programs. When it comes to our fine arts programs, band, theater, BPA, BOA, UIL, etc., they're stingier with the money than anyone in the world. They only start to give some sort of cash whenever these programs go farther than regional matches or state-level matches. But when the football team loses for an entire season, they're willing to spend $20,000+ for the football team. So the most stupid thing the school bought was the remodel of the cafeteria, which was repainted non-school colors, and the new and improved football field. Story 25. My school exchanged perfectly functioning chairs for new ones that nobody likes, because they're ugly and weird and they are just not fit for school. Meanwhile, windows are broken, the toilets are disgusting, the blackboards are so old that the teachers may not let students write on them because they could fall off. The list goes on. A lot of German schools are in such bad condition, and nothing much is done against it. It's actually really sad how Germany gives a damn about educating their youth, but complains about lacking experts in all kinds of fields. Story 1. My 6th grade class went to the 1964 World's Fair in New York City, and one of the mom chaperones lost Tommy. We couldn't board the bus home until he was found. The chaperone was crying and sobbing. Our teacher was furious, and nearly all the kids were dying laughing. Well past our scheduled departure time, some official with a walkie-talkie told us Tommy was found and that the cops were driving him to our bus. We all cheered and jumped up and down. The adults were relieved. Our school bus was now the only one in the lot. A cop in a golf cart came. The kid was Tommy, but not our Tommy. Everyone gasped. About 10 minutes later, our Tommy showed up, all on his own, eating cotton candy and carrying 3 bags filled with souvenirs. Story 2. There was this nerdy kid that somehow ended up dating the most popular girl in school. And then he got super popular and went to the dance. And he did this crazy dance called the African Anteater Ritual, and everyone else started doing it too. Story 3. In high school, we had an organization called the Dad's Club. They would work the concessions at the football and basketball games, raise money for the school, do charitable events, etc. One day, I went into school and everyone was talking about how one of the dads that volunteered stole $5,000 from the Dad's Club. This was 1987, so that was a lot of money back then. A kid came up to me the next day and asked me if I heard who stole the money. I said no. He said it was my dad. I found out later it was indeed my dad. Story 4. In junior high school, one part of the school was evacuated because of a shark. It was actually a fetal shark preserved in formaldehyde in a glass jar that someone dropped when moving it from one science classroom to another. In high school, we had a near riot. The unlikely cause was a mystery movie being shown that turned out to be some kind of bizarre Monty Python movie. We had paid money to see this and didn't know what to make of it. Story 5. In grammar school, one of the lads, Donnie, found a trap door at the back of the metalwork classroom. He crawled into the space, and we shut the trap door and moved a bench over it. The teacher could not understand where the knocking noises were coming from. When we let Donnie out after 15 minutes, the teacher knew where the cursing was coming from. Story 6. All of the best crazy things came out of shop class. Probably the most notable was when someone was curious what would happen if they put their finger on an industrial belt sander. Answer: lots of blood. There was one time someone got caught with tobacco in his lip. The teacher called him out and told him to open his mouth, but he refused. So the teacher choked him until he spat it out. Oh, and we had a band teacher for 3 years that was known for his outbursts. The biggest of which, he threw a music stand at a student. Story 7. We had a game at lunch called Killer Bee. The object of the game was to catch a frisbee 3 times. Then you got to throw the frisbee. The catch was that there were upwards of 20 other guys out catching. Well, maybe 10 were actually trying to catch. The rest were otherwise occupied. It was like a mosh pit. The crazy part was that I don't remember anyone getting seriously injured, and I'm pretty sure no one actually died. If there are any other guys from the class of 78 reading this, they might be able to verify it. Story 8. Taylor County High School, Taylor County, Florida. 1983 or 4. We caught an armadillo around 5 p.m. on a Sunday. Stuffed it into an old gym bag. Monday, 6:30 a.m. Get on the bus with the gym bag. Lunchtime, 11:30 a.m. That armadillo had been in that bag for over 18 hours. It's North Florida in late August. It's hot, around 90 degrees. Our lunchroom was not big enough to hold all of the students, so there were 2 lunchtimes, but it was still very crowded. The armadillo shot out of the gym bag like a rocket, straight into the crowded room. You could tell where he was by the human wave left behind him. He might have weighed 20 pounds, and one that size has impressive claws. He was going so fast and it was so crowded that hardly anyone saw it, so they had no idea what was running around, bouncing off their legs. It was by far the funniest thing I've seen in my life. The armadillo even managed to escape. He was caught several days later and painted the school colors. Story 9. My Spanish teacher had been looking for a new home for her parrot, and the special education class had expressed interest. Almost everyone sat in front of their lockers in the morning before class. One morning, a parrot flies down the hallway at 7 a.m. Next, the entire special ed class comes full speed down the hall chasing it, happy as clams. The janitor ended up catching it in a set of double doors. Oh, and some guy into the hand dryers, then duct taped the buttons on. Story 10. We had a pep rally before some big homecoming football game. All seems to be going well, except for the bonfire they promised, then canceled. The crowd of about 200 high schoolers all start to notice that there seems to be commotion over at the football shed. Apparently, some staff and faculty had to detain someone in the shed until the police could arrive. Cops come. Two go in the shed. They come back out looking disheveled and in disbelief. Next time, a larger group of cops goes in. It took 4 officers to get this girl out of there, kicking, screaming, practically foaming at the mouth. And that, kids, was the first time Madison ever did PCP. Story 11. Some people were smoking pot on a balcony. They went inside. It was spring in the Southwest. Hot, dry, and windy. And little did they know that an ember caught on the couch. By the time they came back, the couch was blazing. Security had to throw the flaming couch off the balcony to keep the building from burning down. Story 12. The winter of 1973 snowed. A lot. There were drifts up over second-story windows, apparently. This caused a snow day to happen. This being Wisconsin, everyone got hammered drunk. I hear people were jumping out of 4th-floor windows to get out of buildings since the drifts were so high and they were so drunk. All of the alcohol in town was drunk by the students, since the roads were closed and shipments couldn't get in town. We didn't have another snow day until 2010. Wisconsin is awesome. Story 13. 4 kids on my basketball team fried their brains on paint cans and that chemical spray that you use to clean keyboards and electronics. It was weird because it happened before a playoff game. I was team captain, so I had to round up everyone. I found all 4 of them lying on the hotel floor mumbling incoherently. One had his face buried in his vomit, and the other 3 were a blubbering mess. 1 made a full recovery. 2 made slight recoveries. 1 has reverted back to the age of 12 and has been bouncing between group homes and mental hospitals for the last 4 years. Story 14. Home economic room in 10th grade. Some guy was arguing with his ex across the room. All during class we heard them arguing. Teacher was a small elderly lady, so she didn't say anything to them. Girl put on an oven mitt, took the metal grate out of a toaster oven, and went toward the guy like she was gonna burn him with it. Some other guy stepped in front of her to talk her out of it. As soon as he moved out of the way, the guy who was arguing with her threw a microwave across the room at her, hitting her in the face. All hell broke loose in that classroom after that. Story 15. Some kids years ago used to crap in discreet locations and wait until they were found. Like air ducts inside the pipes of the sinks. The dude got creative. Best one I heard was this one. He stole a copy of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, hollowed it out, put crap in it, and returned it. Took the administration like 3 months to realize where the stench was coming from. He was never caught and has gone down in my school's history as the Phantom Pooper. Story 16. University student here. My school's student association ended up headed by some people who were mismanaging pretty much everything, including money. It's also been revealed that some members of the corrupted board have family ties to a previous board member who was found to have mishandled nearly $1 million in association money, and was at the time being sued. So there was a big movement on campus to have them ousted and banned from running for elected offices again. Student council meetings were heavily controlled, and some people were kicked out for questioning these people's actions. A vote was held to try and get them out. Group holding the vote sets it for a day in November, and the student association announces the date for the vote is in December. People trusted the group holding the vote more, so they got ready to vote on the November date. During the vote, someone released pepper spray inside. Fire alarm was pulled, and the whole building evacuated. Eventually, everyone is let back in. Voting is set to continue. Fire alarm is pulled again. When everyone is back inside, about 30 students take up the responsibility to guard the fire alarms. In the end, the voting was a unanimous decision to get rid of the corrupted board. They are escorted out by security when it's time for them to pack up their stuff in the office. Story 17. It happened during middle school. Mind you guys, this was on a military airbase in Germany, so nothing exciting really happened there. At the time, the high schoolers were allowed off campus for lunch. However, the middle schoolers were not. So, being at that rebellious age, many middle schoolers snuck off campus by jumping a fence. Well, during one normal lunch, the intercom goes off asking for some teacher, possibly the principal, to come to the office immediately. They forgot to turn the intercom off after the announcement, and all you heard was screams. What ended up happening is some group of kids decided to jump the fence to go off campus for food. However, one girl was wearing a ring which ended up getting caught on the fence. She ended up de-skinning her finger. Story 18. When I was a sophomore in high school, I had a professor that everyone likes that I'll call Professor X. Anyways, everyone loved Professor X. He was in his early 30s, got along with all the other teachers, and was laid back enough that he would joke around with the students without being awkward about it. About halfway through the first semester, he didn't show up to class. Then the next day, and the next. When we asked our sub about him, her response told us something was wrong. I'm not allowed to talk about it. Immediately after this, we all started asking around and looking for anyone who knew anything. This is what we found out. Professor X and his wife were going through a rough patch in their marriage, to the point where divorce was discussed. X did not want a divorce and thought up a plan to win her back. With the help of two seniors, he was going to stage a fake robbery and rescue her. On the day it happened, the seniors got in, duct taped her to a chair, and waited for him to come back. X ended up chasing them off, but the wife got out of the chair and called the cops before X could explain what just happened. I don't get his logic at this point. So, now our city has a manhunt for two 18-year-old guys, and they had no idea about the marriage problems and were led to believe that it was just a prank. After a couple of hours, both of the kids' parents were able to talk them down and turn themselves in. Professor X went on to run for a bit, but was caught, and last I heard, works in Dillard's. Moral of the story, be wary of any pranks you're involved in when you start duct taping people. Story 19. Okay, take your pick, ranging from tame to, well, not so tame. Can't verify everything, but these are what I heard. Math teacher had an affair with new female teacher, and she was made to quit, not him. Different math teacher threw a paperclip down my top and asked to retrieve it. French assistant, no older than 21, started screwing the 40-plus-year-old teacher she lived with. He rented a room to her, now in a happy relationship. Fat teacher had her lunch stapled to the staff room ceiling by other staff. The same fat teacher was taken for a spin in someone's new Porsche and then couldn't get out. Had to be cut out of it by firemen. Two girls got stuck in a soundproofed music room for hours after school had finished because the handle had broken off the other side of the door and there was no reception. French teacher got asked to leave after calling a black guy a monkey. Kid brought in a live grenade to school for show and tell. As for rumors versus truth, 1 to 3 I know are true. 4 and 5 were told to me by an ex-member of staff. I was friends with the girls who got stuck in the music room. I spoke to the head teacher about the French teacher leaving, and my boyfriend was in the school at the time the grenade scare happened. As for the chisel incident, I knew the guy who did it. Story 20. Not really at the school, but it's something a student did. We have a rivalry with one of the other schools in town, and years ago it used to be pretty intense. We had people break into our school and vandalize it. Vandalize the big T we have in the front, and brand their mascot into the turf field. It got to the point where a student here with a pilot's license took his dad's plane and TP'd the entire rival school and the neighborhood around it. Last summer, a student climbed on top of the school and kicked an air vent in. He wound up in the auditorium loft where we keep the old sets and props for drama. He signed his name in the dust on a chair and jumped down onto the stage. He left a few flash drives laying around, broke into a, thankfully empty, locked cabinet in the sound booth, and broke into the paint cabinet. Then he tagged the loading dock doors and left the auditorium. He went to the choir room and on the floor, then went into the band hall and broke through the door there. Story 21. I had a teacher a few years ago, let's call him Mr. R, who was quite serious most of the time, but occasionally could be laid back. One day, one of the boys, let's call him Mark, was asking all these unrelated questions to the lesson to try and get Mr. R off topic. I guess he decided that as he wouldn't stop, so he'd answer Mark. Mark asked him what fire looked like, and in response, Mr. R started dancing around and then rolling on the floor, saying, "I'm a fire! Whee!" and other fire like noises. It got recorded and put on YouTube, and he got fired the next week, so we all thought he was fired for inappropriate behavior or something. Story 22. In my senior year, my entire senior class came in one day, all riding razor scooters at once. So we had over 500 people riding on scooters in the hallway at once. Some people would scoot by really fast and knock them over. I do remember being in the front of the pack as we entered the school. Some guy in front of me had the worst thing happen to him. A teacher came running out of the door and saw all of us coming in. And on pure instinct, the teacher clotheslines the guy like 5 feet in front of me. Story 23. We had this thing where the entire junior and senior class was brought out to the football field, where some firemen had positioned 2 horribly mangled cars. A bunch of drama students from our school got in the cars and pretended they had just crashed. They landed a helicopter on the field and had fire trucks and ambulances come in and take the kids and stuff. Pretty intense. The best part was that it was televised the next day. They were talking about how the students were so surprised and shocked by everything, and showed a picture of the local dealerinos at our school with his mouth open slightly, honestly looking pretty bored. The situation was pretty fun, and the guy got busted last year, I think. Story 24. When I was in college, some of our dorm supervisors decided to have an Easter egg hunt. My room was right next to a supervisor's office, so I learned that this would be happening. I also learned that some of the prizes would be really nice. So on the day of the Easter egg hunt, instead of going to dinner with everyone else, me and 3 of my friends stayed in our dorm and watched where the eggs would be placed. Then my friend had this great idea to write out little notes to place inside of the eggs once we had removed the contents. Once the supervisors went in to dinner with everyone else, we went around and collected the eggs and replaced them with notes. Then returned to our dorm to watch and go through the prizes. When the first people started finding eggs, the effect was amassing. We could see the people bringing the notes back to the supervisors. They looked more and more confused with each one. The notes said things like, "You snooze, you lose," or "Too late, sucker," or other things like that. Story 25. I went to private school. Had 2 other private schools come to campus for some religious event. Other kids decide to start fights, water bottles flying everywhere. Like 500 to 600 kids just throwing water bottles willy-nilly into the air. Saw a teacher just get clocked in the face with a mostly full bottle. Did not know what was happening. Bunch of AP kids decided to bully 2 other AP kids. One guy's parents' car got covered in cat food, ruined the paint job. The other got a watermelon full of plastic utensils and an M80 blown up on their lawn. This did go to court, and I believe a settlement was reached. Story 26. In German class, in year 7, we had an incredibly irritating and stupid teacher. One day, we had a room change, but the notice fell off the door, so the entire class was sitting in the room with nothing to do. The classroom had 2 doors, one on the outside and one leading to an inside corridor. We got all of the tables and chairs and barricaded the inner door like there was a zombie apocalypse. The teacher took 45 minutes to realize that maybe the students were in the other room. He tried to take down the inner entry but could not get in. He then took another 10 minutes to walk 12 meters to the other door. We all got detention, but it was hilarious. Story 27. It became a fad to carry a screwdriver and unscrew every screw. This was high school. It resulted in an assembly and the principal yelling at us, saying how he tried to open doors but the handle would come off, as well as other things.